Porter Wagoner was an old-school, rhinestone country singer from the Ozarks. He was nicknamed the Wagon Master and the Thin Man. For 20 years, he hosted the Porter Wagoner Show, where he sang duets alongside a series of young, big-haired cowgirls with sweet voices.
All I want to love you promise beneath the halo moon.
One of those young women he hired was 21-year-old Dolly Parton. Together, they smashed the country music scene, charting 21 singles on the Billboard Hot Country Music list, including the #1 hit, Please Don't Stop Loving Me. Ironically, that was the same sentiment Dolly would share with Porter when she tried to get out from under Porter's shadow. The first time Dolly tried to leave the team, Porter didn't take it well. During interviews, Porter said he wasn't cruel, but he was the boss. He signed the checks, so his rule was law. To soften the blow to Porter's ego, Dolly Parton wrote him a song that would tell him, from the bottom of her heart, that she valued and loved him, even though she was leaving to start her own solo career. That song was called I Will Always Love You.
And the Grammy goes to...
which would go on to win a mountain of awards.
Dolly, of course, coming from you, this is truly an honor. You wrote a beautiful song. Thank you so much for writing such beautiful songs, really.
She sang it first to Porter before anyone else could hear it, and he said it was the most beautiful song he'd ever heard. 6 years later, after a streak of bad investments, years of drug abuse, and heavy drinking, Porter Wagoner sued Dolly Parton for leaving. He claimed a breach of contract and asked the judge for $3 million from Dolly. In response, Dolly agreed to settle and gave Porter $1 million. In an interview with Ralph Emery, she said that she still loved Porter and would work with him again under the right conditions. Porter, on the other hand, slandered her in multiple interviews. Wagoner told a Tennessean, "She's not what I thought she was. And Dolly Parton is the kind of person I would never trust with anything of mine." But even with the $1 million, Porter was soon broke. He tried to sell his music catalog to make ends meet, so Dolly swooped it up and bought it, and held on to the rights of his songs. When Porter wanted to buy his songs back, she sent him a letter telling him she loved him and that he could have his songs back for free. When Porter was dying of lung cancer in 2007, Dolly went to his bedside, wiped tears from his eyes, and sang that song to him again, I Will Always Love You. If you're looking for a role model for forgiveness, you can't do much better than Dolly. You're listening to The Re-Engineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then, we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. And I'm your host, Todd Laments, the extrovert.
And I'm the writer, researcher, and introvert, Joe Anthony, whose job it is to dig through the outer layer of no-duh on the internet.
Whether we forgive or not is a clear question when it's a stranger hurting us. Someone parking our spot, a broker ruining our retirement, an assassin shooting at our president. We probably know whether we'll forgive them or not. But what happens when it's someone we love? What happens when forgiving someone close to us might empower them to hurt us again? In part one of our forgiveness series, we talked about practicing forgiveness for our own mental health and physical well-being. Today, we talk about the flip side of forgiveness. Forgiveness because we want to keep loving the person who's wronged us. Whether it was for love, money, or addiction, we want to know, how do we forgive them without feeling like a doormat? To help us start the process of forgiveness, we have 3 myths. Myth 1, once bitten, twice shy. If you forgive someone for doing something shitty, they're going to do it again and again. Myth 2, some people are born forgivers. It's in our nature to be people pleasers. Dolly Parton forgave because Dolly's a saint. Period. Myth 3. Are there actual steps to forgiving someone if you want to keep the relationship going? Are there ways to screw up forgiveness so badly that a relationship crumbles? We're going to get to our myths. But first, I want to talk to Joe about the Porter Wagoner show.
Okay, so we have this clip of Porter Wagoner. You can go onto YouTube and watch the Porter Wagoner show, and you can watch the first time Dolly Parton is on TV on the Grand Ole Opry. You can watch them singing together for years. Like it's all up online. So what was your take watching this very old show when there was like only 10 channels on TV?
It really made me smile. It's just so corny but fun. It's totally high energy. And you could tell that these two, even though they were different generations, one was a very young woman, and the one guy you could see, he kind of had that trucker, smoking, drinking look about him, but a voice from a godly voice. And they were just having fun, teasing each other and playing along together. What did you think of it?
Now that you say that, the trucker comment, he reminds me of like those whip-thin granddad truckers who just survive on cigarettes and coffee.
Yes.
And his nickname was the Thin Man. And early it was becoming like he looked just like a rhinestone figure. Like he is the Oscar statue if you put him in rhinestones. But as he got older, he kind of became like Skeletor, like it that really clung to him. But watching the old clips, I started on. I accidentally started in the middle of them singing a song called Genie's Afraid of the Dark, which I had never heard. And so they look adorable. They sound amazing. It's heartwarming. And then I listened to the lyrics and I was deeply disturbed because it's all about basically a family who loses a child. So it was yeah,
a heart-wrenching thing. And he, it's funny because Dolly Parton is a huge star now, right? And has been for generations, famous for 50 years or whatever. He sounded way better. I mean, and I know she was early in her career, and he was towards the latter of his career. But he has a gorgeous voice. As an amateur singer now, I'm kind of tuned into these things. I thought, wow, he's he's good.
Yeah, our whole narrative opening is about how much of a shyster he was about letting her leave the show, and whether or not she's breaching contract and like suing her for $1 million, even though she forgives him left and right over and over again. But honestly, at the start of their career, you can see his point. Like you can see that he really did start her out, and he really was at the peak of his career. He sounded amazing. So can we? I want to dive right into why Dolly had to forgive him. Like we started our last episode, which was all about basically how to forgive strangers for our own mental well-being and health. This is all about how to forgive somebody we love without becoming a doormat. Because if you forgive somebody you love and they are the type to take advantage, they'll do it again. So we want to talk about, how do you forgive somebody but also not get taken advantage of a second time? And to our best example of this is Porter. And it's go ahead.
And I want to start with how the relationship started. Dolly Parton was not just anybody off the street. She'd already signed a record deal, and she had actually had a hit song. His show, and this is in 1967, was her big first enormous break, though. He had a partner for about 7 years, and she was a fan favorite. They loved her. Dolly came to audition for this thinking that maybe she had a chance 1 in 1,000, like most auditions, right?
Right.
And halfway through her auditioning, he said, the other lady's out. I need you in. And it almost knocked her on her butt. She was like, oh, that was easy. So he saw something in her immediately. He didn't have to think about it. He saw her, liked her. He knew good thing when he had it. Now, another thing I think is important to remember is 4 million people watch this show.
Right.
So we talk about exposure, and it's a niche market. It's country music. Country music is very mainstream now, but it was not in the 60s. So it's a career maker.
Now that you say that, because there was so much, like in the 60s, we're talking like Woodstock and stuff, like the music of the time was not slow, loving cowboy ballads.
More serious anti-Vietnam,
Right. When you say that he saw something in her, was it that she was young and attractive and would look good standing next to him on TV and get better ratings? Or do you think it's because he was personally attracted?
I think it was her talent, because let's face it, there's lots of young, attractive singers in Nashville. There always has been, there always will be. He saw something in her. Now, what's funny about this is the woman that went before him and then Dolly, when they started, again, I said that they were crazy about the previous woman, and not so. They were outright didn't like Dolly to the point it was getting negative press. He stood up for her. So instead of raining down on her and bullying her and saying, hey, you're not doing as good as the girl before, he said, no, she's good. She's going to get better, and you're going to love her just like I do. But the real switch in it was when they went from doing, it was more like a sidekick. He was the main event, and the woman was the side singer who'd sing every once in a while.
Right.
It all changed when he put her out front with him as equals, which again in 1967 is ahead of its time. And so he treated her not like the bimbo whatever. He treated her like, no, she's the talent just like me. And as soon as she did that, and as soon as his hardcore fans realized she ain't going anywhere because the old man likes her, everyone bought in.
I kind of like that. Because it's so easy when you read about Porter Wagoner and their fight to brand him as just a out and out villain, especially because we know what Dolly became. Like she's so beloved now. Anybody who would challenge her or hold her back, it feels like that is a villain. But standing up for her, that reminds us that there's a reason why she loved him, and I don't think her love was misplaced often. Just reading about Dolly, she sounds very smart to me.
And that was the first part. And now let's go to the bad part. That's when the relationship started. That's when it was building. That's when it had value. When Dolly went to leave, though, that's when the $3 million, and he started having his own problems. He was looking to play the blame game, and he put the blame solely on Dolly. And he started saying nasty things like this. He started saying, she can't be trusted with a single thing. He says this with like a bad taste in his mouth.
Yeah.
And then he said things like, family isn't even off limits to Dolly. Dolly lives in a fairyland. And all Dolly said, and again, a saintly woman is, she just wasn't being heard. And isn't that a common theme for women, not us men not listening to them?
That's especially for the time, yes.
Yeah, I don't know if men would come that much further than that. I have to ask your fiance about that. I don't know how good of a listener you are.
I could tell you if she thinks I'm a good listener or not, but I haven't heard what she said, so that would
she blah 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 wah 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 something.
Yeah, exactly. I really honestly tried to find any interview of Dolly slandering him back, because I was like, well, what's the worst she had said? Like, how equal was this sort of back and forth? The most I could find was on that interview show. What was it? Ralph Emery. She made a joke, like he asked something about creative control, and she said something effective like, well, he wasn't the most creative one in our partnership, but he had the control, and she laughed like it was a joke, but like not nearly the same level of slander that came from him when he was like talking to the Tennessean. So,
and you could see if someone's suing you for $3 million, I would have a few mean things to say, a few choice things. And again, she's been with him for a long time. She's got a lot of information on him that we don't. I'm sure she could have talked about how many times he showed up drunk. And
right.
I mean, I'm sure, as we all know, anyone's been around alcoholic, and I have, we're a special breed. You're never at a lack of content for our stupidity,
Right. So we will get to what exactly the lawsuit was about, but it's good to bear in mind that they had many hits together. It looked like they were going to have a joint career forever. Like it looked like they were just going to be a singing duo that just sort of took over the world. And then from his perspective, it felt like she was just left. Like she just left him high and dry. She abandoned what looked like a lucrative, skyrocketing career, and she went off to do movies. And to us in modern days, we've seen Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, and we've seen 9 to 5. And so we know that it was amazing, and she did very well. At the time, though, it looked like she was abandoning country singing for schlocky movies. So I can understand his perspective. Again, I'm not defending him. I'm putting things into perspective because it's it was an argument. It wasn't just a villainous move. Am I giving him too much credit? Does that sound like I'm taking a side at all?
Well, when you first told me about the story, I just thought this was this evil jerk guy, and then and I look at it. I guess what I learned about this is how to handle a real serious situation. A career, a financial thing, a career thing. And I didn't realize what a sophisticated business person that Dolly Parton was. And that's how this started. We were going to do a thing about my singing coach, who's an opera star, was telling me that a lot of people don't know that Dolly Parton is one of the most successful people in the music business, and she's a shrewd business person.
Yeah.
So, and I started looking into that, and it was shocking. She's through her whole career negotiated the best and made money on every single thing. She's like the gold thing. So, and done it for 50 years. So it's not a coincidence. She didn't just get lucky. It just wasn't good timing.
Right.
From her movies to her music to her royalties, she's nailed every. One of my favorite ones is the Bee Gees, who are amazing songwriters and write a lot of songs that people don't know. The song that they're most proud of, and they were musicians, family musicians their whole lives, was Islands in the Stream. Well, guess who recorded that? Dolly and Kenny Rogers.
Dolly Parton, yeah.
Yeah, and so they were envious of it. They're like, what? It was the best song we've ever done. Kind of like her song, I Will Always Love You. And we gave it to somebody else.
I literally, about 100 episodes ago, we did a Bee Gees episode about, when are you in your prime? How do you know it? And the Bee Gees, they couldn't record their own music anymore because they had been chased, literally like threatened with guns and chased out of America for being disco when disco died. And with the death of disco, nobody took them seriously. They had to sell their music, and they cried. One of the brothers cried when they sold that song to Dolly Parton because it was something they wanted to record and they knew they couldn't. And it's amazing listening to Dolly and Kenny do that. It is such a good song. So the betrayal is betrayal number one is Dolly leaves abruptly from this successful partnership, and the more serious betrayal number two is Porter reacts very, very badly to it, and he sues her. At first, yeah, go ahead.
Dragging her through the mud and suing her.
Yeah, slanders her.
Very, very public about it.
Drags her through the mud. Forgets that she wrote him the most beautiful song on earth. What he called the most beautiful song. I Will Always Love You. Forgets that she wrote that as kind of like a breakup song. Ignores that. Sues her. Drags her through the mud. It's a terrible sort of like splitting. And her forgiveness was pretty much, as far as I can tell, not right immediate. Like, it's not a Reagan level forgiveness. She made jokes about it and stuff. And the older she got and the wiser she got, the more she was able to play it off as jokes. And she always said, even early in the bitter years, in the interviews, you can hear it in her voice when she's still hurt by this. She still says she loves him. She still says that, under the right circumstances, she'd partner with him again. I don't know how she did that. In my personal life, Todd, you said during the last episode, if somebody does something for you, you've said you'll let them do almost anything to you.
Yeah, and this one reminds me of anytime I talk to a woman who's getting a divorce, a messy divorce, and I'll ask, how's the dad? How's your ex-husband? They'll always take this deep sigh and they'll say, he's a good father.
Yeah.
And that's like the nicest thing that they can muster up. And you could tell that they want to tell you a laundry list of what a piece of shit he is, but they're going to just say that. That's a universal thing for saying he's a scumbag, but
right.
At least he's a good dad. And I like that they're, I wish I was, that's why we're doing this episode. I'm hoping that this is going to make me more Dolly-like.
Yeah. The Dolly version of that is instead of saying he's a good father, it's, well, he's a good singer. So the first question, that our first myth really is, can forgiveness be a weakness? Can the urge for us to forgive a loved one, can it be a weakness, or can it feel like a weakness? And the answer is hell yes, it can. Our whole first episode felt like we were championing forgiveness for your own mental well-being and your own physical health. But there is serious data to show that, some people are prone to forgiveness, like it's in their nature, and some people are prone to repeatedly offend and transgress if they're forgiven. Um, for example, there's sort of the old trope of uh, um, a wife who forgives a husband who drinks too much, or a husband who philanders, they cheat. And if a wife is too quick to forgive him, he's more likely to do it again. And there is serious data to back that up. There are studies that say that yes, if your spouse is low on forgiveness, if they're, what do you call it, the sort of like Russian stereotype of the short little wife with the spoon ready to beat the crap out of the guy who steps out of bounds or drinks too much. If you are low in forgiveness, your spouse is less likely to transgress. Just
Really?
period. Yeah.
See, that makes total sense, right? The men say, I'd never cheat my wife because she would kill me. And they say that with that look in their eyes of utter fear. But it makes sense that, as a kid, which parents you can kind of get away with more, right?
Right.
And so you push those buttons, you figure out those boundaries, and you kind of know where you stand in the relationship.
Right. And some people are more likely to get into that relationship. Some people are more likely to seek out a person who is a natural forgiver. And
That's
that's
interesting. Yeah, someone that we call him a doormat, right? I
right.
always say that, and I see in their relationship, they handpicked this guy out so she could just bully him her whole life, and you could see it, he's cowers, and
Right.
it goes both ways. It seems like and I don't know if they did it consciously or subconsciously, but you could tell that they're partnered up that way to.
We're going to be using the studies and data from Michael J. Wohl, who is a PhD from the University of Alberta, who did a whole lecture on this. He does not call these people doormat people. He calls them natural forgivers, but we can use either.
Natural forgiver sounds way better than.
Yeah, all you doormats out there like me.
Is part of it sensitivity? Just people, their hurt feelings, they hurt easier, so they forgive less.
Well, that's a really good question. That is actually the big question is, there's trait forgiveness, which means it's in their nature to do it. And that kind of breaks up into a couple of categories. One is you are too optimistic. You have an optimistic view on human nature. You like to get along with others. You want to be agreeable. In fact, agreeableness on the Big Five psychology spectrum, agreeableness corresponds with the higher likelihood that you'll forgive somebody for doing something awful. So like the agreeableness factor making you a natural forgiver, that's kind of like saying, Dolly didn't forget that this happened. She just wanted to forgive him because she's an agreeable person. She's likable and she likes being likable. She told the Emery show, the reason I know she didn't forget is Emery said, did you and Porter sue each other? And Dolly very emphatically was like, no, he sued me. But even after that outburst, she's still very optimistic. So she does, to me, to my untrained eyes, she falls into the agreeableness category. And on the opposite spectrum, this is where I land, unfortunately, neuroticism. If you are high in neuroticism in the Big Five, you have a tendency toward anxiety, depression, self-doubt, and other negative feelings. Those all tend to make you a low natural forgiver. So if Dolly is on one spectrum, being agreeable and just wanting to love people, I'm literally on the opposite. I'm way more neurotic naturally. I have high anxiety and depression.
Give me an example of how that looks in a forgiveness situation. Give me a scenario.
Well, if somebody wrongs me, because of anxiety and depression, I dwell on it. Like Dolly can know about it and factually understand Porter Wagoner screwed me over, but she can forgive emotionally. I can't. I dwell on it. I think about how dare they. This is a personal attack. That it means disrespect. They're going to do it to me again. and you repeat the conversations in your head that you've had with them. You analyze how they wronged you and try to like amplify it in your mind. You catastrophize it. You invent narratives. So the more neurotic you are, the more likely you are to be a low forgiver, which is important to know about yourself. Like when we go through these two very robust episodes about forgiveness, if you are asking yourself, why can't I seem to forgive people? The second question you should ask yourself is, what is my neuroticism level? Do I have high anxiety? Do I have high depression? Because if you have those, you are less likely to be a natural forgiver. You're more likely to do what I do, which is dwell on it, take it personally, catastrophize it, and basically hold that grudge forever. End of episode. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I just want to let you know that I won't forgive anything you do or anybody else.
Oh, great. Good to know. Well, I'm reminded of a time I worked, I was definitely on a losing streak, and I was working laborer jobs. And when you work laborer job, you work side by side. And I was older, I was in my later 30s, but I was working with young men. And I worked with one young man this one day. His name's Dave. And Dave and I were talking. When you work labor, you talk all day. So you know each other's life stories after a week or so of this. And he was pretty socially awkward. And he had one girlfriend in his life, and she'd just recently broken up with him. And you could tell it was really, really on his heart, and not the kind of guy to be talking about his feelings, big, strong kid. And I asked him what's important to him in a relationship. And he said, almost with tears in his eyes, he said, I need a woman that's at least understanding a little bit. And what that meant to me, and what you're saying here, is someone who I don't have to be perfect with,
Yeah.
If I make any mistake, I'm out. And I just really hurt my heart to think, I know how he feels. Like sometimes you're in love with somebody and you feel like you have to be the super you, because if you do anything wrong, you're out. And that's a terrible way to live your life.
And the whole part about being a doormat, like if you are a natural forgiver, there are reasons to forgive and ways to forgive that will make you less of a doormat. So whether you're on the neuroticism spectrum like I am, or you're a natural agreeable forgiver like Dolly Parton is, there are sort of like 3 different paths to forgiveness. And one of them leads to a healthier relationship with well set boundaries. The other leads to a relationship that basically stays the same. And the one that I take most often will lead to a crumbling relationship. So we're going to talk about that one last, so I don't feel quite as bad.
And just in case you wondered, I'm in both camps. There's some people I have endless forgiveness for, and there's other people that I hold to that an impossible standard, which I'm not proud of.
Do you hold people to a higher standard when they're closer to you?
I think so. And I've heard that from an elderly guy who says that family relationships are the hardest to keep because we feel entitled.
Yeah.
So I feel like I can get very judgy with family. Like for some reason, I expect them to be perfect, but I don't expect that from my friend. I'm saying it out loud. It doesn't make any sense, but it's the way I feel.
I had a drunk friend of mine vomit into my aunt's shoes once. That was immediately forgiven. I'm just like, oh, he's flawed. Everybody's flawed. And then my brother like borrows a book from me and like gets it rained on, and I think he's a horrible human being that I can't forgive ever.
He's right there with Ted Bundy on your list.
Yeah, exactly. Right? he's the guy that shot Reagan to me, and I'm ready to ditch him. So yeah, there are grades of forgiveness, obviously, and who you set boundaries with, that's going to be very important. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about healthy forgiveness versus unhealthy. How do we forgive somebody? Well, first off, in this research set that we're going to link off to from the University of Alberta, they asked huge groups of people how they came to forgiveness, how they arrived at forgiveness. So we're skipping all of the stuff we talked about last episode about the reach steps. That is the process of forgiveness. This is once you get there, once you're ready to forgive, how does that pan out for you going forward with somebody who's close to you? Specifically, this was about addiction and problem gambling, but forgiveness is forgiveness. It applies to most relationships. Path 1, a lot of people elected for path 1. Path 1 is you have an open discussion. You let the person know how they felt and how you felt. You let them know how they wronged you and how you expect them to not do it in the future. Basically, you set boundaries and you say it in the open. That is the part that hurts, is when you talk to somebody who has wronged you and you make them say it out loud. It makes you feel like a dick. A lot of people will just go forward without saying it, like because it feels better, it's more comfortable. You assume the other party knows what they did, but that's not really how boundaries are drawn. If you select path one, where you have an open discussion and you both acknowledge what the other person did, the relationship will improve.
I'm getting uncomfortable just talking about it. I don't even have a.
I'm sweating. Yeah.
I have to sit down. I can just see us sitting down and having to talk about things. You probably have some things you need to tell me, don't you?
This is if I were to do that, I would say, have a seat, and I'd be like, do you know what you did wrong? And I'd have you say it out loud. And
Well,
just that whole setup, I'm kidding, but honestly, that's what you have to do. And it's the most uncomfortable thing you can do. I would rather just never talk to that person again. That's easier.
well, my wife doesn't give me the silent treatment. I'm saying either it's something I said or didn't say or did or didn't do, and I really don't have a clue. And it should be fairly obvious, that she's this pissed off.
Right. So, yeah, the open discussion, the moment of truth, everybody says it out loud, relationship improves. That's the first path. Path two is the one more people do, and it's more of an expression of morals. Instead of an open discussion, you just accept that everybody is fallible, and you continue on. I literally said that a couple sentences ago, like just a few minutes ago when I was talking about Dolly and I was talking about forgiving strangers. I use that phrase, everybody is fallible. But if you use that as the way to get past somebody wronging you, if you just say, oh, everyone's fallible, let's move on, the relationship will stay the same or it will get worse. Those are the two things that will happen, guaranteed. Relationships don't really improve if you don't have open discussions and boundaries. And that's uncomfortable for me. Like I said, I'm a neurotic. I'd rather not do that. But that's apparently the healthy way. So says psychology and Dolly Parton. And then the path three is honestly the one I've taken more often. I'm ashamed to say it. Choosing right for the sake of right, which is what we talked about in the first episode. Basically, you forgive somebody because it's good for you. You've read it in a self-help book. You listen to our first episode or you listen to another podcast about forgiveness. You know that it lowers your blood pressure and it's good for your heart and it's good for your nerves if you just forgive and stop hanging onto the memory. But if you don't have that boundaries, you don't have that open discussion. If you just say, I'm going to forgive this person because I will feel better and I will live a better life, your relationship with that person will deteriorate, even with the forgiveness. Even if you say, I forgive you, if you are just doing it for yourself, it'll work. You'll be healthier, but you're not going to have that relationship down the road.
See, this is hard for me because I feel like when you're reading this stuff and you're talking about this stuff, I feel like we're judging, like we're this like self-righteous, better than everybody. And because there is two sides. Like you and I are struggling with this Dolly Parton story because we went into it thinking this guy's a jerk and Dolly's not, but then we're kind of like, he has his points here and there. We don't agree with him 100%, but it is hard because things aren't that clear, black and white, and people don't always know what they did. And do you want to call them out on everything?
Right?
Is that really fair? To be this very structured. And I know you're talking about big stuff, but it's just it's an uncomfortable thing. It's going to take some practice, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, no, it's very uncomfortable, and the reason why I've been so careful this episode to point out where I fall short or where I'm starting out below the table is because this is difficult for me. Of the episodes we've done, this is emotionally tough, and I thought forgiveness we would just have a very quick 10-minute episode in total, like not two parts. I thought it would be 10 minutes of, yep, forgiveness is healthy for you. Forgive everybody, move on. But no, it gets way more difficult when you talk about having an open discussion and
if you do it wrong, it doesn't work.
Right.
It doesn't work, and you still have those bad feelings, and you're not mending relationships, and you're not setting boundaries. So you do have to do the work. It's something we have to practice.
Yeah,
I love this outline that you did. That's great. That's something I can use.
Yeah, Michael Wall, the from University of Alberta, we'll link off to his lecture. He even says in his studies, he says, make it explicit. If you forgive somebody, make it explicit how they wronged you. Make them say it. You say it, even if you believe it shouldn't be stated. That was his words, and I think it bears repeating 2 or 3 times, like we've already done. can we talk about? You don't want to get it to the point where it's at court. Like when we say make the wrong explicit, state it. We're not saying state it in front of a judge when you're about to sue each other. How did that go down with Dolly and Porter? Obviously, it got that far with them.
Uh, Dolly's a lot of the things that happened was, she was younger. We talked about the age difference of 20 years ages and father, daughter looking at least. His career started to tank and hers started to skyrocket. He was the hit person, and then she started getting more hits than him, and she started really being a big, big star. Dolly said this made him very possessive and totally intimidated and competitive with her. When they used to work, their competition was a healthy collaboration, that they're competitive to put on the best show. Now it was he wanted to put her down and outdo her, but it was kind of like a losing fight. His career had already peaked, and like we talked in our Bee Gees episode, musicians especially have a peak time where most of their music is listened to, and then they kind of coast off that. But the value of his stuff was not what hers was, and this was very hard. And she didn't think that he discovered her. He wasn't her manager. He wasn't the record company that signed her. He was someone that she did a show with. So she wanted to move on, and she had bigger dreams beyond just doing the show with him. So that's where it all came. Those were the two camps. He just couldn't accept that he wasn't as big a star as she was. He was just obscenely jealous of her and wanted to hurt her financially.
Right. And in his mind, she's still like the nearly the teenager that he had to defend on stage and tell the audience to stop booing at her because she's not the last girl that he had up singing with him.
Yeah, he genuinely felt that without him, she wouldn't be there, and she doesn't think that's the case.
Yeah.
She thinks, I don't know how I would have got there, but I would have got there.
This is going to sound weird, but like I've never seen Dolly young. Like I realized that during the research for this episode, I have only ever really known Dolly in my lifetime as like sort of a past middle age. And young Dolly, she looked like who's the actress from Chuck and Yvonne Strovitz. Like they bear a shocking similarity.
Yeah, I hadn't seen her that young either. I was surprised. It's just this big hair. She's just this Southern girl. It was funny because we're studying for the show, and we've been talking about Dolly a lot. And then the football game was on, so I called Joe, and then she was doing the halftime show. And then she was a big hit all over the internet. It was viral that she was out there. She dressed up like in her aging years, in her grandma years here. She was dancing around in the same thing that the Dallas Cowgirls wear. So she's been, like Robin Williams. She's been famous for so long. She's been famous for 50 years.
Didn't she just like get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or something like that? Even though she's country, she's still in the news. Like literally this week she's in the news.
Talking to people about this, everybody has strong feelings about her. I've heard stories of people having crushes on her their whole lives, and I hear all these stories. You just bring up her name, talk about Dolly Parton, talk about this episode, and you'll be surprised how people's eyes light up.
The guys that record Radiolab, one of the hosts, I think it was Jad Abumrad, he left doing Radiolab and then recorded a whole podcast season about Dolly. Like it seems so weird because like they were just like they only talked science and studies.
Yeah, they're so serious and stuff, right?
Yeah, and then he's like, later, guys, I'm gonna go talk about Dolly Parton for a year.
That's so funny.
When we talk about do you want to get to the steps of forgiveness, like how we? If we decide to take the not the high road, but if we decide to take the boundaries road, the one where we hash it out, we discuss, we go through reconciliation. Do you want to walk through the steps that makes a forgiveness worth it, especially if it's family or somebody very close to us?
Yes, I'm listening and I'm paying attention, 100%.
Okay. The first one, this is not going to shock anybody. This is the one that is the most uncomfortable. And this is what we were both probably thinking of when I was talking about being open and discussing and setting boundaries. The first step is acceptance of responsibility. That's where you sit down, you put them on the couch and you the transgressor must acknowledge and accept responsibility for their actions. And according to their, again, the same research paper as we're going to link off to, it says this step is crucial as it lays a foundation for a genuine apology. Because if you don't get that first part out of the way, if you don't get them to say it out loud what they did, if you don't sit Porter Wagoner on the couch and he actually says, I sued you because I was jealous, then you're not going to get a good foundation for your relationship. You can't start anything. There's no boundaries to build. You don't have a fence post to start boundaries. If you're not open and they're not open. So here's actually where I want to ask a question of you, Todd. If somebody wrongs you and you set them down and you say, how did you wrong me? Let's talk this out. And they lie or they make something up or they refuse to acknowledge how they wronged you. How do you proceed with that?
I get upset. I get visibly upset. And then, well, it depends. It depends who the person is. But a lot of times I kind of get the way that they saw it. What usually I get out of it is that it wasn't as malicious as I thought it was. That this is what they were thinking. And when I hear that, it almost like, oh, it really takes the edge off the sword for me usually.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was scared. I needed money. I was in the throes of addiction, or just right. I emotionally needed something that wasn't being provided.
Yeah, but if they downplay my feelings about it and say, "Oh, you're just being oversensitive and get over it," and that didn't happen, that makes me angry. It makes me more resentful.
If I was any cheesier of a producer of the show, I would put in the sound of a bell dinging or like the high striker ringing, because you said it. It's if somebody downplays your emotions, that's the red sign. That means that this can't go further. You may have to cut ties, or you may have to abandon the process of forgiveness and just say, we're not seeing eye to eye on this. Maybe we can come together again later, but we're not. That's when you do a Dolly Parton. That's where you might have to split away from them for a while for your own health. I know that's not always going to be an option, especially with family. But if somebody downplays your emotions and they refuse to even talk about, what they did, then that is you can't build a foundation off of that.
But I can see the value in this, because a lot of times if you talk to someone about something and they then they do it again, you feel kind of foolish for trusting them again.
Yeah.
But you have set that boundary, and they know, then they're really deciding to do that. That's clear that that's one of your rules.
Right. And that's actually, we're on to step 2 already. Step 2 is setting the record straight. And in that, it says it's important to establish a mutual understanding of the events. This is something that comes up in weirdly hostage negotiation by Chris Voss. He talks about establishing a mutual understanding. You both, you'll both start with your own story. You'll both start with the person who hurt you will start with what they needed at the time, what they were feeling at the time. You'll start with, here's why that hurt and why it was bad for me, and why that eventually led to such harsh feelings. And once you guys have established a mutual understanding of the events, then you can move on. That's when you start discussing reparations. That's part 3. Now that's an interesting way of phrasing it too, is what are reparations as far as forgiveness? In Dolly and Porter Wagoner's case, reparations for them was wild. Like I don't know if this is getting too quick into the next stage of the lawsuit. Reparations for them was Dolly paying $1 million to Porter, and then later on just doing wild favors for him for what I can see for no reason other than just because she's a saint. In your history, have you ever asked for reparations from somebody who had hurt your trust?
I have, and I felt, in the divorce, there's always a lot of that, yes, you got this, and that's right. But I kind of feel like Porter does my divorce, where I kind of got cleaned out, and I thought, I thought we wouldn't have had all this if I wouldn't have done all this too, So just to be fair, and I got more back later, but it was because I kind of took the high road and the time thing set in. So I had my own Dolly Parton there.
Okay.
I wasn't an A. If that's answering the question,
Yeah, that hits it. And reparations in a divorce, I mean, that's going to be physical, tangible dollars.
it is and
Um,
emotional. I always say that about divorce. I say divorce is an emotional bankruptcy as well.
yeah,
Do you have anything that pops up in your life?
emotional reparations certainly. I had an instance where I had to sort of like draw boundaries for my father after he had done something egregious, and it was emotional. He was an alcoholic and he had abusive moments. And as an adult, I basically after going through this process, when we hit reparations, it was we don't talk about certain subjects just because it is insulting. And it was telling him what not to talk about, what subjects would make me not want to speak to him again. And he obeyed that. Like it once it was said out loud, it kind of set it in stone. It gave him a list of things to back off on. Um, but
Yeah,
emotional reparations
yeah.
takes a lot of forms.
I had a similar thing with my stepfather because he was really browbeating me about immigration, and I don't see eye to eye with him on that. So I
Yeah,
told him, do not bring this up to me because I'm never going to see the way you do, and I don't want to hear it because he gets so emotionally charged about it. And instead of just, having a spirited debate, he's trying to bully me into it, into a point where I become violent, and because he just won't stop. And I said, we just can't talk about this. It's the old bar thing. We don't talk about politics or religion. And that's a real thing. Those two
yeah.
things in an alcoholic should not be brought up because they lead to violence. And it does escalate fast. But we all have those triggers. And sometimes it's not enough for us just to feel a certain way. We want to make, especially Joe being a know-it-all, he reads so much and researches so much. He thinks he wants to convince everybody that he thinks his way.
That is the true reparations. Is eventually Todd will ask me to stop bringing up all the stuff I've been reading and to tell him I'm right all the time. Um, and after reparations, the next step is an apology. Um, it's not an apology because it's an apology is not a demonstration from the other person that they're wrong. I think that's the biggest mistake we make with an apology. Everybody expects an apology is going to solve things, and they also think it's like planting the wrong flag or wearing the scarlet letter. They think that an apology is the end of in itself toward reconciliation. That once somebody apologizes, it's done. That's not true. An apology that is too quick is kind of insincere. Like if I ask Todd to borrow money and then rob him blind, and then like the moment he confronts me about it, I say, "Oh, sorry, bro." No, that's insincere. Even if it sounds sincere and it's too quick, it's likely not well thought out, and it's something I haven't emotionally processed yet. Um,
I think you just said a good point, and I just want to add to that a little bit. Everyone's had this experience where they've loaned someone money, they didn't pay them back. But what does everybody say? It's not about the money. It changed our relationship. It made us so uncomfortable that we couldn't talk to. And that was the worst part of it. Haven't you felt that?
Absolutely.
And I've been on both sides of it. I've been the one borrowed the money, didn't pay it back, and I felt terrible. I avoided that person forever. And it's
Right.
horrible. You just lose something, and it's like, oh, if you knew that it was about, it really wasn't about the money. It was about the feelings are more powerful than even something we can measure like money.
Oftentimes, a fast, genuine apology can be as bad as a false apology. Like if you apologize too quick, it almost feels like it's rude or it's rote, and you're just repeating it to make me feel better. And it's almost as bad as saying I'm sorry you feel that way.
Well, yeah, and I believe 0% of what people tell me and 100% of what they show me. If it is that quick and they're too good at it, because they do it all the time and they don't mean it.
Yeah.
And they didn't think about it. And so it is healthy for them to push back and say, no, that's not what I meant. I didn't mean to do that, and to think about it. So that's something for me. I'm just not going to apologize right away. Just think about it and show them that I care and show them that I'm going to change the behavior.
Right. And the truth of it is that apology, it is not the thing that will start the healing process. What will do that is the final step. It's reconciliation as a process and influencing each other's mindset. Um, Basically, you tell the other person how you're going to operate in the future in a way that you won't, repeat the infraction. In the case of Porter Wagoner and Dolly Parton, it's them agreeing what their boundaries are going to be financially and in a creative venture. And they said this during like I think it was like a roast or something. Like there are recordings of them in interviews saying that if we recorded again together, it would be as a creative partnership. Not one person would hold all of the keys to like, what they're recording, what they're doing, who wins the awards. And that input is where they actually started seeing eye to eye again. If you're wondering how the story ends, there is forgiveness, but it came with that reconciliation. They had to see each other as equals again,
And it took time. It was not immediate. There was bad blood for a long time, and there was money exchange, and it was back and forth. Yeah, so it went through this whole process. This is a very good outline for that,
Yeah,
for a successful one. To the fact that at the end they were doing roast with each other and hugging and kissing, but it really is nice,
What did that forgiveness? Can we talk about the forgiveness of Dolly and Porter? Like, how did that look? Because when we say Saint Dolly, it really is true. This is crazy.
Yeah, Wagner, God bless him. You could just see this train wreck coming, And late in the 70s and 80s, he started making just poor business decisions. And the two final things were in 1981, his record label of RCA, which is a major record label, dropped him. And then so when it rains, it pours. He owed the IRS $500,000 in 1981. That's a lot of money. And so he was going to bankruptcy. He didn't have anything left. His records weren't selling. He didn't even have a record deal anymore. He wasn't touring. He didn't have a TV show. So he had to sell off all of his publishing rights. And so Dolly stepped in and bought the catalog so he didn't have to go BK, so he could pay off all his things, keep the ship from sinking. And then what happened? He kind of got his shit back together, and he went back to Dolly. He had enough money to buy it, which he thought was fair, and she gave it to him as 100% free as a gift.
That's the part where I can't believe it. Like she effectively
She had two chances to put his lights out.
Exactly.
Which we think he would have done to her. He would have put her underwater with a smile on his face if he could have.
Yeah. And by buying his catalog means that he didn't give it over to another big, like we've all heard of legal fights between record companies where they will buy like the Michael Jackson catalog, where they will buy
the Beach Boys or whatever.
Yeah, they'll buy a record catalog and then they'll hold on to it forever and sue anybody who records it again. Like Wagoner could have lost his entire catalog to like a big pirate record company or
a capitalist
or investors. Yeah,
just a capitalist, and also too, I think it's important to know that their songs are who they are. Right? It's like you and your writing. It's what they spent their whole life doing. It's 100% of their value. So it's hard to sell it off for, of course, when you sell your house, you feel like you're selling it too cheap. But think about your soul. I mean, you're selling what you've done your whole life. You think this is all it's worth, and nobody even wants it. And I'm sure it was humbling to have Dolly write him a check. I'm sure there was some tail between the legs for that, right?
Right.
And then of course she may have been the only one that even gave it that much value. Those other capitalists might have thought your stuff isn't worth shit. So Dolly, what my opinion would happen, and I just from what I've read and what I've seen, she probably gave it a generous money there to get him out. She probably figured out what he needed, gave that to him, and then gave it back to him. So it's just very, very kind.
Yeah,
Mother Teresa kind.
Did you hear about the what she did when Porter Wagoner passed?
No.
So in 2006, Porter Wagoner succumbed to lung cancer, and he was on his deathbed, and she showed up, and basically the last thing he heard as a song is she personally sang "I Will Always Love You" back to him.
His favorite song that was written for him.
Yep, exactly.
That's very sweet.
That to me is the biggest takeaway for our episode, our two-parter. we're going to ignore religion, saying that it makes you closer to God. We're ignoring forgiveness for the sake of other people's comfort and to make society feel better around you. Truly, forgiveness is for yourself and your health, but forgiveness with boundaries and with outward acknowledgement is how you move forward with a loved one. That is a genuine golden type of forgiveness that allows you to keep a relationship and a connection. That is healing to yourself. It takes away cortisol. It gives you better nervous system. And as a natural neurotic, that's the one I'm going to try for from now on is that boundary setting, open forgiveness, and the Dolly Parton style of forgiveness.
And I'm going to work these steps in the next trauma crisis I don't know what it is, but I know it's coming. And I'm going to work these steps through because I can just see the strength in this. It's stronger than avoiding. It's stronger than, just quickly apologizing and moving. Whichever side I'm on, I'm going to work through this whole thing.
That makes me feel better because when I spend our marketing budget on drugs and alcohol, I'm going to need that forgiveness, Todd.
When our book is in the when I see it at the dollar store and it's not even a book, I'll say, oh, shit, you get 5 of them for a buck. I'll say, oh, great. Self-aware wealth my ass. Yeah. You've been listening to The Re-Engineered You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us. We have a new episode every week.
You can connect with us at www.re-engineeredyou.com. That's where we have research links, show notes, feedback, and blog articles for each of our episodes.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.